cannot believe we've made it to 23 and a half hours. If I look a little tired, that would be why. But this has just been an amazing one. I can't even remember what we said. What one movement, 24 hours and lots of Torah. And here we are in our final half hour, and we are still standing and drinking lots of coffee. And it is my honor to be able to moderate this last half hour. It felt very important in this journey to hear a lot of Torah and think a lot about it. And we've talked about so many elements of this. We've talked about gender. We've talked about choosing Judaism. We've talked about a lot in the last 23 and a half hours. And I thought it was really important for us to end by looking forward a little bit. And so it's my pleasure to introduce not just to this community here of several hundred people who are joining us, but also really to the larger Jewish world as you take up a new role. Dr. Bianca Gonzalez, who right now is the Diversity Talent Manager and now is the incoming Associate Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Hillel International. And we talk so much about how important it is to be thinking about the work that Hillel does and for our college campuses, and then really for building the future of Jewish life. So just briefly, I met Bianca. Let's see, how old are the kids? I feel like the kids were 9 months old.
Yeah, that sounds right. They're
right.
Now they're going to be 3. So
they're so cute. At a playground, of course, with a PJ Library and Schechter program. Bianca and her wife are Schechter parents and have really, been involved in lots of things in my very own West Hartford, Greater Hartford community. And so that's kind of how we know each other. And so, Bianca, I'd love you to start by just telling us a little bit about your journey to Judaism.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I was born to a Catholic family that wasn't necessarily very practicing. I think that's a very common story in Puerto Rico. You're Christian and mostly Catholic, and you just do what a friend of mine calls it, lapsed Catholic. And, very common in Puerto Rico is to go to private school because public schools in Puerto Rico are not very good. So if you are somewhere working to middle class, you go to private school. And I happen to go to a Catholic private school. And that really shaped my relationship with religion from a very early age. And I never felt like I really belonged in the Catholic world. I often felt different, excluded. And it wasn't until, I was in high school that I came out to myself and to my friends. And that really was a challenge. I've heard of stories even in my own school where people that came out were kicked out of school. So it was a not very healthy, safe environment. And I think that I had a reaction to that experience of totally disengaging with religion generally. So I went on to college. I stayed in Puerto Rico. I majored in sociology, and that really also impacted the way that I saw religion and culture and all of that. Eventually, I ended up going to grad school in the US. And I often joke that the first Jewish person that I met was someone at NYU when I did a summer term in college. The second Jewish person that I met was in Mississippi when I was there doing my master's, which is a whole nother story for a whole nother time. And then the third Jewish person that I knew was the person that's now my wife. So the first day of grad school at the University of Connecticut, we were both getting our PhDs there. We also shared an advisor. So we walked in and we saw each other. It was kind of like love at first sight type of thing. And, my wife is Jewish by birth, grew up in a very Jewish family. And I had always been intrigued about Judaism. And I remember reading as a child, I was a big nerd. I'm still a big nerd. but I remember reading a lot about the Holocaust and reading, I think the first novel that I read cover to not novel, the first book that I read cover to cover was the Diary of Anne Frank. That was very young, and that also always like spiked my interest in Judaism. And it wasn't until I met Emma that I really started digging deep into like the practice and observance. And it was kind of like a journey for us together, because even though Emma was born Jewish, she grew up in a really secular family. And she was also in her process of reconnecting with her Judaism. So I remember we were both here in Connecticut by ourselves, no family. And I think we were engaged at that point. And we were very alone. And I said to her one day, I think we should look into joining a synagogue, because we don't have a community here. We have to build a community, and we're going to be here for a fairly long time. I mean, it took me, 7 years to finish my PhD. So it's a long time. So we looked all over, and I happened to come across actually a Reform synagogue in Chester, Connecticut, which is like the middle of nowhere. It's literally a synagogue that was founded by Jewish farmers in rural Connecticut. And there I remember telling Emma, let's go to Shabbat services and let's try it out. Let's just see. I'm very much the adventurous person. So I remember, like, I will never forget this ever. We walk into the sanctuary, and it's this very beautiful building. It was designed by the only building that's been designed by Saul LeWitt. So it's just stunning. It's a very particular building. And it was the end of Passover. So there was a Yizkor service too. It was Shabbat. Kabbalat Shabbat happened to be end of Passover and Yizkor. And I had just recently lost my grandmother. And my grandmother was someone that's very instrumental in my life. So I remember as the Yizkor service started and the cantor started singing Psalm 23. And that was the moment that I started like crying, tears full on, because that was my grandmother's favorite Psalm. And she knew that like the back of her hand. She knew it in Spanish, in English, in different translations. And something that's always very salient to me is that as my grandmother lay dying, my mom would recited that Psalm to her as she passed away. So I kind of had this feeling of, this is where I'm meant to be. This is where I should be. And none of this feels uncomfortable, even as the first time I stepped into a synagogue. And I remember like getting in the car and telling Emma, like, we have to join. And at that point, I wasn't sure if I wanted to convert or not. But I think a week or so passed by, and I kept like having this inner conversation with myself. And I remember very clearly that night I was dreaming in what I thought was Hebrew. Clearly wasn't Hebrew because I didn't know Hebrew, but I was dreaming about being in the synagogue. And I kind of felt like it feels like this is the right thing for me. So that next day I wrote Rabbi Rachel Goldenberg, amazing rabbi, still very close friend. And I said to her, I want to start my conversion process. And she agreed, and we studied together for about a year. And I went to the mikvah April. It's been 5 years. It's been 5 years since April. We went to a mikvah, an Orthodox mikvah in New Haven, which is really interesting. And that has been one of the days that I will never forget. Just going into the water. I'm originally from Puerto Rico, so I have a really strong connection to being near water. And that very much felt like coming home. And everyone, like Emma was crying, Rabbi Goldenberg was crying, I was crying. And since then, I've been very involved in Jewish life. Would have never expected to be a Jewish professional, but I am. I toyed with the idea of going to rabbinical school for a little bit, and now I'm working with Hillel International, doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work, which is within my wheelhouse of expertise.
Amazing. So we'll get to the Hillel part in a minute. I'm just like processing this whole moment and thinking about that power of Psalm 23. And, really it's as if in some ways, like, your grandmother's great grandchildren will be able to say that psalm and so much more in Hebrew. And what a blessing, and what a very interesting turn. I'm sure this comes as no surprise to anyone that the Catholic Church and the Catholic school did not feel like a welcoming and safe place really to come out. I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about the sense of welcome and inclusion in terms of being a queer family that you have found within Judaism?
Yeah, actually, I remember like having that first conversation with Emma and being like, so how was your experience coming out as a Jewish person? And she was like, it was a non-issue. And I'm like, but it like did not compute to me. We're very fortunate to live in an area that has a lot of synagogues. And that's one of the reasons why we moved here. And in every setting that we've been in, we've largely been in liberal streams of Judaism and conservative and reform synagogues. It's definitely been a non-issue. We walk in, our kids come in with us. We're two moms, and everyone has been extremely welcoming. And I always make this distinction of being welcoming and having a sense of belonging. So I think welcoming is just, you're trying to be nice and hospitable, but when someone truly belongs, it's like it's your house, it's your home. And that has been our experience here in the various settings that we have been, even at Schechter, right? That was one of the first questions that we asked. And it was like, we've been there for a year now, and it's been amazing. And the teachers have been so welcoming. And the other kids, it's funny that everyone knows that Liev and Noah have mommy and mama. That is such a relief to me, because I want to be my fullest authentic self in whatever space I am in. And also at the same time, for me to develop a connection with the divine, with God, I need to feel like the way I am is the way I was meant to be.
Absolutely. And so the words you're saying really actually echo the words that Ruth says to Naomi, right? Your people shall be my people, your God shall be my God. Where you go, I'll go. Where you lie down, I'll lie down. That's that sense of, it's not just, oh yeah, come on in. It's you belong here. You're part of this. And we want to embrace you and make it that this is your home and that this is your God, and that your children feel that. Absolutely. Wow, I'm so glad that we've been able, or we, collective Jewish world, we've been able to provide that. So now let's talk about what you're doing in Hillel and how you're helping to do that for next generation. So tell us a little bit about that new position and what it's all about.
Yeah. So Hillel has been starting a new initiative around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's a team of two, me and Ari Levy. I'm the director of DEI. And we are very much focused on creating the safest, welcoming, belonging environment for any Jewish student to be able to walk in to any Hillel and any 500 and something Hillels that we have and not feel like they don't belong. As a pluralistic organization, pluralism comes with its complications, but it's also beautiful to see the ways in which students grow in their Judaism. And our mission is to empower Jewish students to reconnect or further connect and deeply connect to the Jewish people. So one of the reasons why I decided to make that shift, I'm coming from the academic world, the secular academic world, is because I wanted to do on the ground work. And I wanted to make sure that the college student population, which is a very important population if you look at the Pew study that just came out last week, for them to deeply connect. And that looks, some of the work that we're doing, you know, some internal processes to make sure that, you know, in terms of HR and bias reporting and all of that, but we're also developing programming generally. Hopefully we'll develop a fellowship for Jews of color, particularly students, to develop leadership skills. We're partnering with other organizations, particularly the organization that's coming to mind right now because we've been meeting with them for the last week is with Keshet, to really support our LGBTQ students. So, and also we've done a lot, Hillel has historically done a lot of work around disability and people with disabilities, and we are continuing that work. So really the work is a process. Like I tell this to everyone, this is the work that's gonna take time, energy, resources, but we're deeply committed to the work. Me and myself, and I can also talk about Ari, we're both in it to win it, like I say, and just, we want to make sure, like what I actually said this in my interview, why I want to do this work is because I want to make sure that when my kids turn 18 and wherever they go to college, they can walk into any Hillel anywhere in North America and know that they belong in that space as kids of biracial children of two moms, children of someone that converted, etc. These multi-layered intersectional identities that they also hold, so they can walk in and own their Jewishness and walk in there and belong and continue to flourish. Because at the end of the day, for me, this is about the flourishing of the Jewish people and the continuity of the Jewish people.
Absolutely. And as you say that, I'm going back to my own Hillel days, you know, some, I don't know, 20 something more than that years ago, and thinking about how it really is the place, no matter who you are and where you're coming from, you're in such a vulnerable and explorative time in your life that walking in those doors, it really is an important place where someone can say, you belong here, and whoever you are and however and whatever expression of Judaism or Jewish feels right for you, welcome, you have a place here. And so we create this beautiful bubble, and I'm fully confident that you guys are going to make some amazing shifts in Hillel's world. And so then my question is, how do we take that beyond? How do you educate all of us old people who are still struggling a little bit with, well, let's face it, everything. Diversity, inclusion, all of that.
I think, you know, I tend to be very local, like grassroots based. I think the first thing that I think about when people ask me this question is, what are local synagogues doing, right? So let's take, you know, our community. What are individual synagogues or the community of the greater Hartford region doing to learn? Because like I tell my students this all the time, anything related to equity, inclusion, diversity a lot of it is learning to unlearn. So it's this process of us accepting, you know, maybe I don't know everything about this, and I might have some biases, I might have some preconceived notions, assumptions that I might hold, but I want to learn, and I want to take that first step to learn about the diversity of the Jewish people in general. The Jewish people have always been very diverse. So I would encourage people to visit resources on the internet. You can start with an organization called Bechol Lashon that focuses on Jews of color, particularly if you're interested in learning about LGBTQ Jews and how to support queer Jews. Keshet is another great organization. And those are just like the ice tip, like the tip of the iceberg. There are many other organizations, but those have excellent resources where you can just start learning individually I also would encourage boards of synagogues or boards of federations or any Jewish organization to think about what the future of their organization is going to look like and how the changing demographics are going to affect the future of the people that they're serving. So if we want to, this is often a lingo that's gets used in Hillel, stay relevant, right? We have to shift and pivot to what younger people want, and also at the same time, what the Jewish community is going to look like in 20, 30 years. The Pew Research Center came out with the study that said, I think 15% of young Jews, I think 18 to 29 identify, or 18 to 25 identify as Jews of color. And that by cohort effect, that number is going to continue growing. So if we want to be inclusive and welcoming and belonging of every Jewish person that wants to be part of the community, then we have to self-examine. And that is a process that will take time and might feel uncomfortable, and it's okay to be uncomfortable. And I think in the US, people are very comfortable, and sometimes uncomfortableness is important for change. And we've seen this in many times historically. So I would, challenge, I'll use the word challenge. I would challenge boards, and I sit on a board, so I know the discussions that happen. Challenge boards to think about what the priorities are for the future, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And I know that's a big chunk of years, but at the same time, to make sure that the changes that they want to make are going to be changes that are going to welcome people and allow people to also join the community. And this could it could look different ways. There are many consultants out there that can help you in this work. There are organizations that have been developing to do this work with different Jewish organizations. And there is this movement in the Jewish world right now towards this. And it's an important time for all of us to know that we're in it together, and there has to be buy-in from the communities. And how do we create buy-in? Through conversations like this. So that's the one first step that I would encourage people to take, to individually learn, to reach out if you have questions, and for organizations to have those difficult conversations, because any type of change is going to be difficult, period. But if you think about the long run, it's important to continue to develop and nurture the future of the Jewish world. And that's going to be more racially diverse, with more people that identify as LGBTQ, with more people with disabilities that self-identify as people with disabilities, because now there's less stigma. We're moving towards having less stigma around disability too. So food for thought.
Yes, that is so much food for thought. And we're actually thinking about this a lot in the Rabbinical Assembly, because like you said, although not 10, 15, 20 years down the road, but like we have rabbinical students who identify in various either transgender or non-gender, I always say that one wrong. See, it's okay to ask. Non-binary. And it's really important to start those conversations. And I actually have a colleague who right now is down the street, Rabbi Ariella Rosen, who you'll meet because she works for Hillel. And she's been really, she's great at saying you can ask any questions you want, the gender things and the pronouns and all of that. Ask me and let's learn and let's talk. And she also said, we need to get together now to talk about what our future rabbinate is going to look like. How are we going to welcome trans rabbis into our community, where in the conservative movement, we're only at I think it's 35 years now since Amy Eilberg was ordained as a conservative rabbi. So we're still pushing that a little bit when it comes to gender. And so to say, well, we finally got our women's space, and now what do we do with that? And what does it look like? And who goes where? And how do we have those conversations? And then, of course, and I think what's really important in what you're saying is it's also who's in the room for those conversations. Mm-hmm. So nothing about us without us, but also everyone should be there. And this should be the kind of conversation that we're all having together.
Definitely. And another thing that I think it's important to recognize and name is that we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. And people are going to make mistakes, and they are going to say the wrong thing and might be confused. And there are people that, like me, that are more than happy to be educators and hold hands. And my philosophy as an educator in this sphere is to know that I'm also walking that process with you, with whoever I'm educating. I'm learning from you as much as you're learning from me. So I think it's important to know that I make mistakes too, and I have my own process. I just started my process 10 years ago, right? But some people are starting their process now, and everyone is at a different level. But that doesn't mean that you're wrong or you're right. It's just a process, and there's always going to be a process, and it's going to be evolving, and we're all learning together. The important thing is to understand that we do have to do the learning, that we don't know everything, and that we're in it together, and to listen to the voices of the people that are living that lived experience, be it trans people, be it Jews of color, be it LGBTQ people generally, people with disabilities, converts. And that's another whole conversation to have about welcoming people. And I've been lucky here, but I've also been in spaces where I've been asked about my halachic status, and I've been asked about my children's status. And that is painful, and that is a pain point. Because
I remember you brought that up with me when we first met. You asked if I would think it was kosher. Yep.
Yeah, and
it's a challenge.
My kids have only known Judaism; they don't know anything else. And personally, and I don't don't know how many people are watching, but like
millions.
I even decided to undergo a second conversion and an open Orthodox. That's a conversation for another time. But yeah, so those are also things that Jews by choice have to wrestle with, this fear of being questioned, or is my conversion kosher or not? Am I going to be allowed to even feel like part of the community? And I know that there's a lot of nuance in halacha and all of that, but simply someone should be able to walk into a synagogue and not be questioned about their status. And another thing that I tell people is, before you question people or ask personal questions, make sure that you're building a relationship, a deep relationship with people before you get invasive questions.
Yeah, that's a really, really good advice. I think that we need like 24 more hours to continue to discuss all of this. I want to honor, though, just in our last couple minutes, the progress, as you mentioned, that both the conservative movement and Hillel have made. And I would be remiss if I didn't share that when I was in high school, I had I think I told you this story, I didn't tell the world this story. I had a beloved youth advisor, my USY advisor, who eventually came out. She was a woman, she came out, she's lesbian, and when she became public as a Hillel director, when she came out, she was actually, and this is like the mid-90s, this was not okay. And this became a battle, and thank God some early thinkers in the conservative movement were able to help and defend her, and thank God Hillel International was able to eventually calm down, although she was called to Hillel International over this. And like now, if you heard of obviously, if you hear of a Hillel director who's out, you're like, okay, where's the news? And this USY director advisor and I have actually reconnected in the last couple months, and she's gone through a transition, and so now is he. And so I want to talk about her in the past, but he today. And it's been really interesting to learn from him and to understand that, you know, there was a time, I mean, we all know this, I'm sure, but a time in the not so recent past when conservative Judaism and Hillel were both organizations that were not inclusive and not able to be welcoming and not able to be saying that you belong here. And obviously we still have ways to go in so much of this, but just the fact that you and I can have this conversation on Zoom, on Shavuot, and then the topic is, you know, just so for all those who have struggled and all those who've come before us, and all those who have had to hide or have had to be questioned or have had to be challenged, I think that, you know, we're heading in a really positive and beautiful place. And if that's not the Torah of the movement and the Torah and the blessing of our work here together, then I don't know what is. So I just want to thank you for this conversation and for our ongoing conversations. And I'm so excited to get to keep watching your beautiful children as they grow up in our community. And as they say, our Hebrew tradition says there's no prophetess or prophet in his or her neighborhood or city. And we're honored that you are in our Greater Hartford community and doing this great work for Hillel International. So thank you. Thank you.
I'm honored to serve the Jewish people however I can.
It's really beautiful. So my friends, as we are about to conclude, we actually have a very special surprise, or something that we're going to conclude with. If you've made it through these 24 hours before either you go to synagogue or you tune in somewhere or you take a nap, just kidding. Our Cantors Assembly has generously shared with us a very brief, I think it's about 14-minute presentation on Akdamut, the liturgical poetry that is recited on Shavuot as an introduction to the Torah service. So we hope you enjoy that. And once again, just so much gratitude for all of the presenters, all of the hosts, everyone behind the scenes, Flow Video, for making this happen, as well as all of our partners, our co-sponsors, and our participating organizations. After the holiday, you can check them all out online on our website, and all of our recordings will also be available as of Wednesday, May 19th, so that you can continue to watch these or watch the ones you missed. So thank you, and I now introduce the Akdamut video.